Welcome, guys. Today we're going to be talking about the uh, the whole system in the United States, the political and the economical system in the Western world, and specifically America, because of course, we all are from America, and like right now, obviously, it's capitalism, and I think we can go one by one and explain our standpoint and where we stand on the spectrum or perhaps the political compass and talk about our views. We don't have to go into in depth, and so that could be kind of the starting point of where we stand. And then slowly we can talk about the flaws of capitalism, if we think there are any flaws, and the problems, and so how to solve those problems. And in the end, we could discuss about what are the different ways of getting to the ultimate structure that you want, whether that be like um, we'll talk about that depending on how we want to get there, and is it even possible to get there. So I think we all come from different, like, we all are like, I don't want to make presumptions, but like we're generally on the left side, but I think we stand on different spectrums of the left. So if somebody wants to start, they can go.
You start, Sasha.
Yes.
Okay, so like I guess I would call myself between social democracy and democratic socialism, between those two, uh, just just the way the political compass is. And I also believe that that there must be like a revolution to get to that place. The reform can't possibly get it done, and not definitely like it's not like that I hate capitalism, but like yeah, I definitely think capitalism is in no alignment with any of the things that they talk about, like democracy and liberty, like that. It just does not work. So I think that we should democratize not just the political side, but also the economic side, which is give the means of production, making sure that all workers have a say into profit, a say into their projects, and a
So
say
like,
into their job, basically. Yeah.
democratic socialism. You're a democratic socialist.
Like, but I'd say between, like, not. I
But
get I don't,
democratic socialism means workplace democracy or democratic
exactly.
control of means of production.
Yeah.
So
So I
like
guess
you
more
fall
towards that.
more under democratic socialism then, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess. Yeah.
But at the same time, like though, I think he's not totally one because most democratic socialists want to do reform because they're mostly ballot box ones.
Oh yeah.
Or he's open to the
He's
idea of revolution. So I think like because I think at this point it's like it's kind of meaningless putting some labels. I think with Sophics
Yeah.
he's trying to be he's like pragmatic. He's like yeah I'll use both reform and revolutionary means to achieve what I want.
That's where I stand. Okay. Yeah. If somebody wants to.
Yeah, sure, I'll go. I mean, I think I'm pretty much similar to what Safik was. I'm more open to the more radical currents like anarcho-syndicalism or even Luxembourgism is interesting because of council communism. But I think those will come after. That's going to take at least a couple of decades of more development before those things can be implemented. So the taking the first steps to implement workplace democracy would be a crucial step to eventually implementing like worker councils or what like trade union ownership of companies. I think that could possibly happen, but it'll take more time. And I'd also agree with Safik that I'm open to either using reformist means as well as possible revolutionary means to advance the material conditions to get us to a point where we can make change. I'm open to both.
I guess I'll go then. I really don't know where I am now, just from like seeing more revolutionary stuff. Because at first I was more ballot box about like more leftist stuff. Now I consider revolutionary action more viable. I guess with just like more of the stuff going on, Chaz going on. I feel like I would consider more revolutionary action. But yeah, I guess I'm left, probably more on the libertarian side, as if we try to refer to like the classic model to graph it. I believe more in like more locally run things where like there's less exploitation, there's more the workers own their means of production and are compensated in full for their labor. I guess that's where I mainly stand in that regard. I don't. Well, I think like you probably need some sort of governing body, but I really believe more of like the power within the people to make their own decisions. I think to get to that point, maybe try doing ballot box sort of techniques, but I feel like since now considering that the material interests of like the capitalists are who are in power are different from the material interests of the people who are voting, and they would probably never really allow that. I'm willing to consider more revolutionary action. So yeah.
All right, I guess I'll go then. Well, I honestly think that the state, what they're doing right now, is like most of the corporations are buying up politicians, and like that is turning into a corporatocracy, and like we have to like somewhat give the state to make it more represented to the workers. So like I'd say not abolishing the state yet. We need to liberate people. So like how do we liberate people? Is through a revolution. So it's not going to be led by a vanguard party like what Lenin did because that led to a dictatorship. This one is going to be led by the people. The people lead the revolution and they overthrow the global capitalism to achieve a socialist society that gives them workplace democracy and of course allowing them to have a decentralized approach like having local communes, electing them to local communes. This is how it could work without a state. But obviously we need some sort of centraling body and some welfares like healthcare, all of that will be done by the state. But that's the only purpose of the state it should be to provide for the people. And rest of that, the people, the worker communes should decide on their own. That's what I think. That's what libertarian socialism is. That's my approach.
All right. Yeah, I agree with mostly what everything you guys said. I guess I don't know. I'm not really that comfortable talking about it because I haven't like done much research into exactly all the terminology and stuff. But mostly, my position is the ideals of socialism. I agree with them, like democratization of the workplace and all that good stuff. What I don't like so much is the practical side. If I understand correctly, like a lot of research and empirical evidence into the functioning of like things like worker co-ops and stuff is not really there yet. So it feels very preemptive for us to be talking about revolution and stuff like that when so much of our society like doesn't even know like what socialism is. Like they think socialism is you kill all the rich people and give all the money away. So I don't know. I feel much more like a case by case basis. But my main approach would be that the first action we need to do is just educate people more, and that whatever changes have to come through like both a change in people's personal philosophies because they've been raised up on a capitalistic philosophy for so much of their life, and also their political philosophies.
Definitely, we have to educate the people. Like currently, people still think the Soviet Union was socialist, and they say, "Oh, socialism killed like 100 million people. Socialism is bad." Like that's the problem with our education system. It's all just propaganda, and we have to tell them the Soviet Union wasn't socialist. It was more state capitalist, and that the state basically did everything, and there was no worker-owned means of production, like what socialism is. So, like, definitely, education is very important.
I'd also like to add, because I have the opportunity, because you mentioned the 100 million death toll, is that if anybody was serious about comparing ideologies, nobody would actually just like compare a vague like death count. Like you could go, for example, you guys are probably familiar with the famines in India that happened because under British rule. How many hundreds of millions of people died because it wasn't profitable for the British to industrialize the country, just take resources from it. Like I could, like if somebody came up to me and said 100 million people died, which anyways is a very, very inflated statistic, I could just immediately just say, well, guess what? 300 million died in India. And then what? Like just having to mention that the parameters through which many of the individuals argue on the case against socialism is almost childish. Like it's pretty infantile to me, a lot of the ways in which they argue. And just to note, because I was reading about this the other day about that book, The Black Book of Communism, is that the guy who, or one of the authors who wrote the book, intentionally tried to inflate the number. He wanted to get it as close as he could to 100 million. So he took, let's say, all of the deaths caused, let's say, by the Soviet Union in World War II. Like the soldiers that fought in the war and against the Germans. So he intentionally just tried to make it to get to that golden number 100 million, to then, because it was advertisable. And additionally, the authors of the book I read are trying to distance themselves from it because of what that guy did. Just saying. So
How much text stuff gets misrepresented from like Adam Smith's books? Because I know that Adam Smith advocated for workers' rights, but then classical liberalism doesn't like. It just totally ignores all of that and just like cherry picks.
I remember what you're talking. I remember that Chomsky. I was watching like a video of his, and Chomsky was literally like, the one book that all college students usually read is Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, right? But they only read the first like 20, 30, maybe 50 pages. They never get to page 400 when Adam Smith's like, listen, we can't have companies monopolize the market. We have to have workers' rights, because I know what's going to happen when companies start to monopolize. They'll start to disregard the rights of the workers. Like, yeah, you're right. Adam Smith himself wrote about it, but no one puts an emphasis on it, because it would ideologically, I would argue, be opposed to the interest of the class that benefits from workers' exploitation. So it makes sense why they would never put an emphasis on it. But the worst is like the economists who espouse it, because many of them aren't. They're not capitalists, they're not CEOs, but it's a good tool for them to ideologically use against individuals, to teach them this philosophy. I think in that video that Dylan put in the chat was really well, because he explains how you have to constantly barrage people with propaganda and constantly say like, oh yeah, of course capitalism, of course we have to keep doing capitalism. What, you don't want it? Of course you want it, and you have to keep feeding this to people, because if you don't, they'll start veering off because due to their material interest in what they want, they'll start realizing that the ideology itself is not for their benefits, for someone else's. I think that's a big argument about manufacturing consent.
So what do we think about like ballot box socialism? I'm interested to hear.
Oh, you mean reformism?
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Because revolution is a very broad term. So
revolution just means people leading to achieve global overthrow of capitalism. But under reform, it's actually a lot harder to achieve that right now. Because like, again, I told you, corporations buy politicians. So like, one reform we could do is not allow money in money in governments. If we remove money in governments, there would be no corruption, or there would be no buying of politicians by corporations. So that's a start to at least achieving reform.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like Bernie Sanders advocated for removing money in politics.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can also probably, because like the way the voting system works is against the people that it's supposed to represent. Like, it's in the material interest of the people that like have the material to go out and vote, rather than the people that like probably need reform the most. So we probably need to like actually make like voting day a holiday, to like actually educate people, to not have like corporate news stations have like maybe 8-minute debates on like these really childish things with like 20 different pundits on a stage, just to like hash out their ideas for like maybe 30 seconds. And like I feel like if we actually make, as Ashman said, our job more to like educate the public and to like actually give them more of an education instead of like make capitalizing off of this faux democracy, then maybe there can be, then maybe ballot box could have a chance. But I agree with you, that's very very small chance that it would actually do something as it is right now.
Most of the legislature or the Congress is like to be in the Congress, you have to be like really wealthy, right? Because you have to be like you have to be like crazy rich, and so like that itself is another thing. Like the people in Congress itself are like people can be in it. People who are like lower class or people who like support or like represent a large majority of the middle class, they're not even in the Congress. So like that in itself is another issue.
Well, definitely, there's a difference between establishment people. Most of the government is just establishment Democrats, and most of the Republicans are like far right too. So like the problem is like the establishment just coalesces on a certain, like we saw that with progressives, right? What the establishment did to Bernie Sanders was coalesce and destroy his progressive movement. So like the establishment is what is killing democracy.
The status quo.
Yeah, the status quo.
So
Yeah,
what
I
is
agree.
so does that mean like you don't try? Like I don't understand what you mean when you say revolution instead of like ballot box socialism.
Well, like revolution is better because like reform is kind of hard to achieve in a
Yeah,
government.
what's the
No, what is it
difference?
though?
Well,
What's the
in
difference?
revolution, you overthrow the global capitalist system that is already undemocratic, and in reform, you try to achieve and reform the capitalist society.
You don't think
Right?
you could overthrow? Oh, wait. How do you go about overthrowing? Like you don't
Yeah, we
think
got to
that
be
would?
specific right now. Yeah, we gotta be more specific because I think the problem is that revolution isn't even necessarily global. I think just for the pertinence of the discussion, we're talking about just a nationwide one to
Yeah.
focus on. I don't know about the dynamics of a
The
global
global
one
one was
happening.
from I think one of Lenin wrote like we have to overthrow global capitalism. That's what Lenin wrote, but obviously I'm not a Leninist, but I've read some Leninist philosophy.
Yeah, Lemon had some okay takes.
So what do you mean like a military coup? Like who?
No, like people lead the revolution.
Yeah,
No, but
what the hell does that
What does
what
that
are they
mean?
doing though?
He's asking you like,
You
what's your
organize.
plan? What
Look
do you
at
think?
look at like not like
Like
Antifa
Black Lives
that
Matter?
is like decentralized. Just like that, we have a sort of decentralized co-op that goes to overthrow
Oh,
capitalism.
okay.
I don't think Antifa is successful at all. I think
No, like
their decentralization makes them very prone to like this misinformation that Republicans
but
can
like
put on
then what do
them.
you support? Having a vanguard party lead the revolution?
Whoa,
That
wait,
doesn't
wait,
work
wait,
either.
wait, wait.
Wait,
Just,
yeah.
I don't think he's supporting a vanguard.
He's not
He
supporting.
disagrees with Antifa. I think that there are crucial critiques. I know that, for example, while a lot of lefties on YouTube support Antifa, I know that both, I think Chomsky and I think even Richard Wolff, when they talk about Antifa, they don't look at it very well. Or Christopher Hitchens, not Christopher Hitchens, Chris Hedges. Sorry, when both
R.I.P.
of them critique Antifa, they're pretty good critiques talking about how when centrists or liberals look at Antifa, what do they see? They see people in black masks and outfits. Like in some cases, being very rowdy, or people would consider violent when they look at footage. That's not going to advance material conditions, and they're very very hard on critique. While some YouTubers aren't. So I'm open to critique of Antifa, but I don't think that means that he supports a vanguard.
I feel like inherently though, an Antifa is not going to get like the best representation. Maybe they are doing like the best they can, but like even the best they can is going to be misconstrued because it's in the material interests of the capitalists to keep the
because they
status
have no
quo.
platform. Their platform is like so broad. It's not. You can't. Your platform. It's not a platform to be anti something. Like that's not a position. That's not a
But
platform.
like anti-fa means
Anti-centrism.
anti-fascist.
Yeah, that's not a platform though. Like
That's true. Yeah, we need.
Yes.
Well, I think he's right because I remember like Vosh would be talking about like BreadTube. If you guys know BreadTube, it's like a subreddit on Reddit. It's like basically the biggest coalition of like lefties on Reddit. Has like 100K, around that much people on it. But really, it's like it's not even really like a coalition actually, because Vosh did a good criticism of it. He was like, "Listen, just a bunch of lefties who get together and post memes. Like it isn't really a platform. The left really doesn't have a platform. The right is lucky because the right has the support of people like the Koch brothers, millionaires and billionaires who donate from their charities and foundations to them. So they have millions of dollars to work with. Lefties, by definition, don't have that. They have to work on grassroots donations."
Yeah.
And people from around the country who self-servingly give them money, you know.
Then you could take the Rosa Luxemburg route, which is a revolution to be grassroots driven and grassroots funded, so that we can have a way to like educate people and about why capitalism is like undemocratic, and that's how we can form a grassroots revolution. That's the Rosa Luxemburg route, or it's called Luxemburgism.
Well, okay, so like so about a revolution, I guess. Like, you're planning on overthrowing capitalism, but I guess global capitalism. But where are you gonna do it first? Are you gonna do it like overthrow the White House first, or are you gonna overthrow like a state legislator, overthrow like a county, sort of? I don't know. That's really unclear right now.
Yeah, this is the problem with the.
I mean, the one thing that I have a problem understanding when you talked about revolution, how you're gonna do it, is exactly that. Because the problem is that I think this is my opinion right now. I know there's some lefties that may disagree with me that are more radical, but honestly, I think this is something that just is a fact. If there were ever to be a popular revolution or revolt, it could be very easily put down by the army. I think in many revolutions, historically, when we look at them, the only reason they win is because the army is on their side. Hell, like how did the Bolsheviks win? There are many material conditions which I think the Bolsheviks can't happen now, but a major reason was much of the army defected to their side. They weren't willing to work for the provisional government, because they saw how they were treating them and that they kept World War I going. So many of them abandoned them because they didn't want to work for them. So crucial part is having the army on your side. There was a really good article by Jacobin. I'll see if I can find it again. I may post it in the chat. But it was really good. It was one of Luxemburg's friends, Karl Liebknecht, in Germany, who went through the revolution with Luxembourg. And his tactic was really good and really pragmatic. I don't think this all works for today, but here's like basically a summary of what he said, how we should achieve it. He was also in the notion that, listen, we can't have like street to street fighting. Like it's just not possible. We're too industrialized. We're too modernized. The army will just come in and crush it. We just can't have that happen. So what needs to happen? What his idea is that we can get socialists elected into power. Okay, so like let's say, 20, 30 years from now, either AOC or some other socialist gets into power, which means that they have control of the armed forces, right? At the same time, lefties can use a grassroots movement to call for massive general strikes and call for other union-related activities to stop all work. So at the same time, when the entire economy to them is falling apart, a general strike happens, the workers can, at that point, say, no, we don't want capitalism. We want to reorganize into worker co-ops. The capitalists have no power to do anything. They don't know what to do. The only thing capitalists know what to do, because remember, they're numerically in the minority. They're a very small portion of the population. Their strength is in capital, but their capital means nothing if they can't control their workers. So as a result, since the socialists would be in power and they have control of the armed forces, if the revolution succeeds on the ground, and since there's nobody in office to send in the armed forces to say break it up, the capitalists will have nothing to do to either abandon the country or flee. Like that's it.
Well, I still.
That's what makes it all so
that's one model.
But
Like,
how
if
are
the
we going to
capitalists
elect the
leave.
socialists if we have a government that's like bought by corporations? How is that possible?
Well,
Like-
it was close.
You can do it
almost-
locally.
Well,
I
that's the
feel
thing.
like.
Bernie Sanders was close. It doesn't, because I think what's.
But he would still get, even if he ran like 2024, he would still get destroyed because like the establishment just coalesces on that progressive. That was one of my problems.
Like,
True.
People
We
are
saw
talking
that
about
they rigged the
dismantling
election
police
too, right?
departments. Like, do you think that was going to happen?
What?
Like 2 years ago, do you think the mainstream media would be calling for the defunding of police departments?
Well, I guess like these protests are kind of working, but like
I
if we
think he
look at
has
it
a
like
point. I think he has a point. We need to be more accepting of more incremental change because at the end of the day, just calling, and Ashwin was right, we can't just say revolution, revolution, because no one's going to do anything. We need to advance material conditions to a point where people would be willing to consider it. So
Yeah.
using what Ashwin said was he's right. Like 2 years ago, no one was talking about reforming police departments. Now everyone's talking about. Hell, even in Minneapolis, they're talking about getting rid of the police department whatsoever in favor of like community protection services. So the only reason we got to this point was because of these protests.
Yeah.
We should fully support them because at the end of the day, the right is much more organized and they can implement change much, much easier. The left is not in a position right now as a whole to go and grab state power. We're not there yet. We could succumb to a nationalist or a fascist revolution much easier than we could do a socialist one. We need to make it, in the next 20, 30, 40 years to make sure that the conditions are much more favorable to our side than it is to theirs. At that point, we can consider them taking like big, big action.
So
But
like
up
you
until
believe
then,
in
it's incremental.
accelerationism? Like let the conditions of capitalism get worse and eventually people will have enough?
I kind of
Like
disagree with accelerationism because accelerationism, as you said, we make life more and more miserable, so people would be more accepting of revolution. I just think it's too unpredictable. What happened to accelerationism? Like, let's say you were 1920s Germany. You're like, okay, let's use accelerationism. Well, what would have occurred? The exact same thing. Capitalism broke in 1929, and the Nazis were able to take over. So the thing is, accelerationism, I would argue, it's extremely unpredictable. And in this climate, if capitalism broke,
I feel like
I
you'd
would
go to
argue,
fascism.
it would be way easier to go fascist. Like, imagine Trump getting another 4 years and capitalism breaks under him. Like, oh shit, he could argue for and justify really authoritarian measures like he is right now. Like, Trump in the past year, I think, has gone more mask off than the previous 3 years of his presidency with his like fascistic language and what he wants to do. Remember how, guys, I think it's pretty easy to say the first 2-3 years, like, whatever, he's like, kind of like pretty, like more authoritarian, kind of right wing, but it's not that bad. And then you look at the past like 6 months and the policies that he's advocating for, especially during these protests. It's much more mask off than it was before. So I'd be very wary of accelerationism as a method of advocating for leftist change.
mm-hmm. I don't
To be a
agree
bit more
with
dangerous.
accelerationism because like I told you, if you accelerate capitalism, you get something called fascism in capitalism is fascism in decay, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Or you would get imperialism too.
Well, I mean, yeah, a
What-
fascist government is just gonna run itself into the drain. But like, if capitalism keeps going at this point in this climate where there's so many right-wing like leaders in the world, not only in like the U.S. but also across the sea in like Britain and like France and like Poland and then like in Latin America as well, it's not gonna go well. The people will just jump on what they already knew. They'll probably like just stay around their right wing social beliefs, and then they're just capitalism is the way. Like I feel like that's something we'd probably have to do is like say, okay, yeah, capitalism wasn't always the way, and it doesn't always have to be the way.
I think also one of the other steps you could take to get to socialism or democratic socialism is to come at least to social democracy, like ability to redistribute the wealth, take all the wealth in the country and redistribute it accordingly. Obviously, like that's still not going to be the best method, but it will be like you've seen like in like Sweden and Denmark, right? Like they have social democracy there, and like that's one step, at least one step better than what we have right now. So I think this combination of reform and then eventually, like Alan said, getting to the material conditions. When we have proper conditions, have a military backing us, then we can go and start a revolution. I think that's the general ideology.
So like a mix of reform and then a revolution.
Yeah, basically something like
But
yeah,
like-
yeah, we use all avenues to power. We can't just not like I remember there was just to insert about like Lenin. He was criticizing the left comms in Germany because they said, oh, we're not going to use the electoral system. Like we're not going to we're not going to try and like vote ourselves in a parliament. And Lenin's like, dude, what are you doing? Like obviously try and get yourself in a parliament. Any single piece of power you can grab is crucial to your success. Limiting yourself to just like let's take up our arms without anybody like vocally knowing you or blah 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 is just not smart. It's not smart at all.
We just have to copy what all the fascists did to get to power.
Yeah, basically.
But that's very undemocratic.
No, what? Hitler went into the parliament, got a majority with his Nazi party. Mussolini.
How can you
Actually,
ensure
Mussolini did it.
how can you ensure that the locally elected leaders won't betray us? That's another problem.
What?
No, like how can you ensure look, like I told you, positions of power, the reason I don't like it is because it creates corruption. I told you power corrupts, and if you
Wait. Do you think
But
you
you
can get
need
to like
power,
a
especially in a
society without
Dude,
going through socialism
look, the
first?
problem with the government is it's a hierarchy, and if we have hierarchies, they're not good. Like hierarchies are not
Of
good.
course.
Okay?
Well,
Of course.
certain hierarchies aren't good. I'd say some that are unjustifiable aren't good, but you need some. There's obviously there are some intrinsic hierarchies you need.
But like
especially right now, you can't like go into like a stateless society and expect it to like not be taken over by like other powers around the world. You need to, I guess, de-escalate the entire world in a sense. Like you can't just abolish the state, because then there will be another state and it'll be somebody else's state that just takes over your state if you don't have anything to like defend yourself
I
with.
saw this satirical video where it's like the whole because of this defunding police thing, like the whole United States becomes really leftist and becomes anarchist, and the East is like, oh look, now we can just go and literally colonize the whole West like they colonized us. So like that's like the thing, like if you go to like an extreme anarchy without realizing the global conditions, other nations could use their military to just straight up come in here and kill you. That's obviously satirical. That's extreme. But
Wait, I want to get back. What did you mean by local leaders will betray? I don't understand that. What does that mean?
no, like I told you, if you don't have like a check system or like ensuring that like if they get a position of power, how can you ensure that they won't like go against what the people, right? Because some of them could be bought by corporations, right?
Like if they're part of if we're imagining, let's say that like pragmatically, let's say like the Democratic Party slowly gets filled up with like AOCs and Bernie Sanders people, and what like 2050 comes and we can stage a general strike. Like, is that what you're concerned about? Like people just won't go through with it? Like,
wait, I don't. If someone
I don't know what that means.
if someone is part of the Socialist Party, then why would they take corporate?
Yeah,
Okay.
like people would know about it. Like I don't know why it wouldn't be in their interest. Like people just
Like
vote them out.
I understand if you want to argue that people will like be driven by greed to completely lie all the time, then yeah, I guess I can give you that. But that's not like really that's gonna happen anywhere, you know.
Yeah, I guess. But we have to at least have like a fair elections at least. That's one thing.
I mean, thankfully, at least at this point, America has basically free elections. Not saying there's not any bumps or like hurdles that people need to go through. There obviously are, but in terms of like counting numbers of votes compared to other countries in which like the U.S. has historically manipulated elections, our own ones are pretty okay, at least for now. For now, not guaranteeing anything later though.
First of all, it's not okay. First of all, we have a two-party system. That's like a two-party duopoly. Like that's like both the parties are just corporate wings of the party, and if we have a third party to run, like the Green Party, they're like have no chance at beating this lesser of two evils
Hmm.
parties. Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Can we actually talk
But
about
like
that?
multiple parties has issues too, because then you have like majority party and then coalition party. It just gets really messy too. It's not like
how multiple party systems are actually better because more parties you have, the more representation you have, and
Yeah,
what
that's
but then
what I
you
thought
still
about
need to
multiple
form
parties.
coalitions.
no. Yeah, they form coalitions, and also the problem with voting systems with multiple candidates is some candidates can take away votes from other candidates, or if one minority candidate wasn't there, then it could be like a whole other candidate would have
Guys,
won, or they could have
guys,
been taking votes away.
every single country except the United States has a multiple party system. Think about that.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I
mean,
mean,
no
North
I would,
Korea
country
I,
is
though.
good. I don't
Denmark
understand
has it,
it.
England has it, France has it, Germany has it.
I
All of
think
these
the
countries
one,
North
have
Korea
I'll
has
say
one
this.
though.
like
I think the one positive benefit. So one positive benefit, I think he's right, is people have. First of all, he's right. Like, it's these two parties are really corporate wings of a very similar one whole party state. I think that. I mean, I would. You could argue on a counter argument. You could say, well, a lot of the parties in Europe are the exact same. It's just they're split along multiple lines. I do think, though, if we transition to a more parliamentary system, that it would make even with coalitions, I think it would still be to some extent easier because I think, well, I could be wrong about this. You could disagree with me. I think possibly if we got a parliamentary system that a lot of the right wing corporatist parties could break apart into more, some centrist leaning, right leaning, and then extreme right leaning parties. Although I don't know about that. I'm you know what I mean? I don't
But
know.
doesn't it just ends
Yeah, I
up being a
doubt.
two-party
I don't think
system
it
in
makes it
the
too
end? It
complicated.
just
Yeah.
it just ends up into being the majority party and then the coalition party.
Yeah, I don't know if it would. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if it would like restrict our ability to make change by first advocating for
you need
parliamentarism in this.
majority party and the coalition party. UK had like multiple parties for like long time. There's yeah, sure you could say Labour Party and the Conservative Party. It's two parties, but like all at least minority parties are at least represented in Parliament, in the British Parliament.
Right.
I
No
mean, vote to
representation doesn't
what
mean that
ex-
you always have to like you have the power. A lot of times they'd have to concede to the majority, which I mean it's not terrible. But I feel like if we were to go to a parliamentary system, I feel like the right would be more willing to, combine with each other, like they
Oh,
have
dude,
been in
that's
the
that's the
past.
isn't that the left meme though throughout history? It's like the left parties always fucking bicker between one another, and then as
Yeah,
soon as the
and
right wing parties are like, we all hate libtards. Yeah, let's get back
yeah,
together. Let's
my
all
my
unite.
concern
Let's unite, guys. All right, that's it.
that's
my
my
main concern with
concern.
multiple parties is like voting rights is so misunderstood, and with multiple parties it becomes super easy to start like exploiting voting systems themselves. So it would be like a lot of reform, first of all, to reform to a parliamentary system. Then you would have to also go through the really complicated process of evaluating what like system you want to count your votes with, because that itself changes the outcomes of stuff too, you know? I mean, yeah, it's possible, but that would be much farther down the line.
Like you guys don't agree with that multiple party system then?
No, I just don't think. I just think there's a lot of like it's impossible to get with the education that people have right now about politics, trying to educate them about the nuances of different voting systems and like and like
Then like how does it work in UK then? How
Because
are
they've
people
always had
it
it,
doesn't work
and they
there's
know
no
about
such
it.
thing as a perfect voting system, right? Like you're gonna have problems, but trying to get people to understand how they're exploited through
Yeah.
through the voting system chosen is like incredibly difficult when you can't even get people to accept like climate change and stuff. How are you going to get people to accept this?
Yeah, I think
Right.
that'll have to come later. I think that'll just because I think he's right. Like it's gonna be too difficult to say let's have parliamentary system as well as let's get all these other reforms we want. I think our plate's already a bit too full.
so like you want to keep a two party system but like run primaries within the two party system, right?
Ideally, I wouldn't want it at all because then you have to pick up the lesser of two evils. I just think that for the needs of the movement, the most practical way that we could like get our change as fast as possible is like a really good method is what, let's say, AOC or Bernie Sanders are doing. So basically, you take positions in the Democratic Party. We know there's no legal way, and I think it would take way too long to ever like convince anybody to go to a parliamentary system. So what we do is we work with what we have. So I think we can agree. I'd like to talk about like third parties. I'm of the opinion that third parties don't work. There is no feasible way, in my opinion, that a third party would ever be able to challenge. I know that like the Green Party now has an eco-socialist as their candidate, and I'm of the opinion that I don't like when lefties try and then say, hey, let's vote for this party. At the same time, I would argue there's no material way you're going to change anything, because if anything, you'd be splitting the progressive vote between this Green Party that will never realistically achieve power, and then with the ones that want to go to the Democrats. Because at least with the Democrats, for example, we can bully them. Like, let's say Biden gets into power. We can criticize like as much as we can out of him, and he'll make concessions, or at least is looking to make concessions. The left hasn't been able to do anything to Trump for the past 4 years. We haven't touched him.
I mean,
I guess only now we've been able to with Corona and BLM.
Right, but it took like a very
Yeah.
big change, like unexpected tide in like conditions for us to be able to do anything like regularly. I don't think
to
so.
give like a real life example, I think I saw some data from like Al Gore versus Bush in Florida, and the third party candidate took away enough votes from Al Gore that Bush won that state.
Listen,
Really?
yes. Ralph
Wait,
Nader
but
steal
wasn't
votes, guys. Ralph Nader did not steal votes. It was actually Bush who won. Like, Bush got like 200,000 Democrats to vote for him, who are registered Democrats to vote for Bush.
Wait,
So-
no, I don't. No, it's not about who's convincing who. It's just the numbers, okay? Like,
I mean, he may have. I think so. I think. Okay, so I think he's kind of right in saying, okay, he convinced a lot of people. At the same time, you're right though. If those people just didn't vote for the Green Party, Al Gore could have been feasibly elected president. Both your points stand. I don't think they're in contradiction to one another.
No, like, you guys actually think like you guys are supported, like somewhat not supporters of lesser of two evilism, or what?
No, I'm a complete supporter of the lesser of two evils. Like the same thing that Chomsky or other intellectuals are. Because
But lesser of two evils doesn't work, because
why?
fundamentally that's like accepting the status quo. And
Well,
which we
here's the
never
thing.
do.
Would you really? So here's then an argument for you, because this is a good disagreement. Because this is what Chomsky would postulate. Why then, for example, which presidency would be better, let's say materially, for people in this country? Trump for another 4 years, turning America even more fascistic than it already is, or Biden, who has already made multiple concessions towards the left in terms of
What has
healthcare,
Biden done? Though? What has Biden done? He doesn't support Medicare for all. He doesn't have.
Well, he's made. Well, here's the thing. What's interesting is that, let's say, so he's already made concessions for some things, like to eventually get to Medicare for all. He's at least acknowledged that climate change exists. He's at least acknowledged that we need to start some kind of a green plan revolution. He's acknowledged that, well, at least I think he talked about maybe 2 years of free college. And here's the thing, you have a fair point to say, well, what if he doesn't do any of them? What if he just gets the president and fucks off? But this is the thing, right? Even if he doesn't do them, it doesn't matter. We can bully him for 4 years, and he knows he needs our vote because he's making concessions to us in the first place. What can we realistically do to Trump? Not just us as a movement to him. What is Trump going to do to the millions of people in this country? For example, DACA, or immigrants who are coming in on the southern border who live almost in concentration-like conditions. And you're passively saying, okay, I'm okay with Trump doing this to these millions of people. Always the lesser evil. While I think in the short term it looks concessionary and it looks like it's bad, it helps with millions of people in their conditions.
For twice in a row.
Well, one isn't acting fascistically, and one is. That's the thing. Enough of a concession as it is.
Like, look, Biden and Trump are both right wing, and you saw Biden lies a lot. And he has dementia. We can't get.
Right, but that's the thing. But would you want Trump in that position instead? For him to do even more harm?
This is my idea. If we can get Green Party support in like safe Democrat states like New York, I don't know, Vermont, all of those safe Democratic states, if we can get Green Party support in those, and then it's the swing states we vote for Biden. That's what some of them were saying, so that we can get Green Party to at least get 5% of the
How are you
vote.
going to do that in 5 months? How are you going
Wait,
to rally behind an
Yeah, and
entire
not just
party
yeah,
in
and
five months?
even if we were talking about, let's say, 4 years from now, we can try and do that, like to give us more time. I honestly think it's such a lost cause because not only I think Ashwin was right how it splits the progressive vote because some progressives are like, okay, I'm going to vote for the Green Party and the rest vote for Democrats. I understand how from the outset it looks bad because ones are voting for corporatists while one votes for an eco-socialist. But materially wise, it's not wise to vote for a party that you know will never have the ability to get to power. And maybe not never, but
Technically, they do. Like,
well, yeah,
if they
but
get 5%,
it's
5% rulers, they
statistically
get federal funding for 5% of the
true,
vote.
but it's statistically so improbable. Why would we waste our time trying to get there? I think it's not worth it. We should try and do what AOC and Bernie have been doing right now, which is shown to be successful, which is getting populist left-wing figures to overrun the Democratic Party. So eventually, in 20 years, as we slowly pick out the positions in the Democratic Party who already rule with like a 50%-ish, maybe 1 or 2% up and down, who vote with a massive majority in Congress, we slowly pick out representatives who are more and more left-wing until in 20, 30 years, the entire Democratic Party is unrecognizable and it looks left-wing. Instead of trying to vote for a party that's being destroyed.
Corporations can intervene anytime. Like, corporations can intervene anytime and mess up the elections.
What do you mean by mess up the elections?
You saw, like, if you see with some of the elections between corporate establishments and left-wing, the corporate establishment basically have lots of money because they're funded by corporations. You saw, like, one of the Senate primaries are looking between Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy III. Joe Kennedy III being a corporatist, primarying against a left-wing Ed Markey.
Right, but how would this help your position? Because you would want to vote for the Green Party, so it would be both for the Democrats.
No, like, look.
If a left winger would vote for
What
Democrat.
I believe is, listen. What I believe is the Democratic Party has to win us over. If they don't win us over, we will vote for just Green Party until they win us over. That's my belief. I'm not a supporter of lesser of two evil. That's just supporting the status quo, right?
I think that's a little bit reductionist to say supporting the status quo because it just reminds me of the Bernie or bust position where people are like, I'm going to vote for Bernie or no one. But
if you support the third party candidate, you're actively splitting the progressive vote, which is what allows conservatives
and you're putting material conditions against yourself. You're making it worse for your movement because you're splitting up your vote and you're not allowing you to make as much of an effective change.
No, did you hear, like, some people are saying, vote Green in safe states. In safe states, Democrats win like plus 30. How do you expect them to go to Republican all of a sudden if they vote
right,
for
but that's
Green
the
Party?
same. I could use the same logic. So if you wanted to campaign for left wingers to vote for
we're not in a
Democrats
safe state though.
Right,
No,
but
it doesn't matter. Like, for the safe states, like if the Green Party opens up a campaign in New York or Vermont or whatever, a safe Democratic states.
How do you know the state is going to stay safe?
Because they're always been voting for Democrats for like the past years, and
what?
The definition of a safe state is a state that votes for Democrat over 20 point margin. That's what a safe state is.
Okay, and then you're changing something. Like,
what do you mean?
You're actively splitting the vote in those safe states. How do you know it's going to stay Democrat? That isn't.
Because it will.
Yeah,
because no one there votes for Republicans.
But wait, this is the inherent problem though, because imagine because remember, if we're gonna at the end of the day, you gotta convince people. So if you have, let's say, a bunch of people in, let's say, a random state like New York State, and they usually vote Democrat, how are you gonna convince these people to just all at once say, you know what? You in the Congress, we have Democrats control, like, okay, let's say, because both parties usually control around 50%. And what you're telling them is, guess what? That lock-in majority that they always have, which is around 50% of power, is now going to be split. How are you going to convince a vast majority of people who already vote Democrat to somehow now vote for Green Party? How statistically and materially efficient is that going to be? Instead of just having the situation we already have, which is the Democratic Party, filling them out, dropping out people who are corporatists, including left-wingers. Like, for example, AOC. She went against a guy who was a Democrat, a corporatist, who won 5 times in a row over the past, I think, 20 years, 15 years? He won 5 times in a row. And AOC beat him with 70% of the vote. She dramatically beat him. So this is an example. It's an anecdote, but it's still, I think it would be way more materially conscious to just vote out people who are in the Democratic Party currently with left-wingers and keep this, 50% massive progressive coalition we have, then vote for a party which is marginalized and is anyways by both parties have agreed will not let them take any substantial power and split the vote. That's just my opinion. I don't think it's feasible.
Also, like
Wait, guys, one quick thing. The Green Party is actually hosting the convention in Detroit at Wayne State.
Oh, that's cool.
July 11th.
Which convention?
Their
their convention, like
presidential. No, yeah, presidential.
Yeah, Howie Hawkins is gonna be the nominee, obviously, or if Jesse Ventura runs.
Great. I kind of want to move off this point now.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like
beat
to death.
Well, so let's finalize the opinion. What are your thoughts on supporting lesser of two evils? Let's finalize it.
I'll go first. I think you kind of have to. I'm in the same boat as Alan. I think we got to kind of have the material conditions, and so at this point we can't just start a third party where, like, you're again splitting the votes and just making yourself less. You're just making yourself vulnerable. I think you got to kind of use the Democratic Party, and according to that, create the means, create the material conditions, so that at some point when you have proper conditions, you can have someone like Bernie Sanders, who's socialist, and then from there you can, like I said in the beginning, go on a reformative position, and then soon go to revolution. That's my position. Ashwin, if you want to say something, please.
Yeah. The same thing about it. And while it's like, obviously I understand where you're coming from idealistically. We want to be able to vote for who we really believe should represent our views, right? But we have to we can't be like totally idealistic about it, because we need to be pragmatic about it too.
Oh yeah, I kind of support lesser of two evils because basically what everybody else said. It's more pragmatic. It helps. It's sort of like a coalition, I guess, in a sense. In a kind of two-party system, it is sort of that coalition. But yeah, you can get the more moderate candidate to make more concessions. I feel like it is somewhat possible, even though it's going to be really hard.
All right, I guess I'll talk about lesser of two evils. I believe that the party should win their people. You can't just tell people to vote for them. You have to win it by policies. And if you don't push for policies, we're not going to vote for you. So obviously right now, some people are saying we're going to support the Green Party because the Democrats have left us. And if Democrats can do something, the Democratic Party can tell these progressives, hey, we're going to support legalizing marijuana with free healthcare. We're going to give that. We're going to give free colleges, a UBI, and all these progressive policies. Then they're going to win over their supporters. But if they don't do that, you have to either ace. Some of them are going to stay home or vote for third party. So that's what I think. If they give us the policies or progressive policies, and right now Biden isn't saying any of that. He's not following the list of progressive policies. And that's why these Bernie supporters are not supporting Biden and going to vote for third party.
Alan, you still there?
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I'm still there. I'm just thinking. I would just be of the opinion that I understand why many of these people are not voting for the Democratic Party. I understand the pain that they went through, especially with a lot of the people that were voting that were very much excited for Bernie Sanders to possibly capture the Democratic nomination again. at the same time, like you guys already mentioned before, I don't want to go over it again, but I just think it would be the most useful to get the conditions we need to vote for the lesser of two evils. Because I even remember that the Chomsky talked about how it's like it's your moral responsibility to, of course, vote in the lesser of an evil. It's now, of course, it's bad because they're both evils in some ways, but you should do what you can morally do, like with your own actions, as much as you can do. Like, let's say, for example, we can't, in our position in society, just regular citizens, we can't just go and say, let's stop the U.S. supporting these wars in Yemen or in the Middle East. We can't really do that much. But what we can take more responsibility for is the actions we have control over, like voting. So even from a moral perspective, I think that's just, I think that's the reason why we should vote Democrat this time, and we could fight on afterwards if Biden decides to not implement what he promised to.
Okay, so I kind of have a kind of cool thought experiment that we could go through. So imagine like you became the president or something, and you had the power to like censor media that was in not fact. What the fuck is the word? Not fact or
Factual.
fallacious. Yes, fallacious. Wait, is that like? Okay, never mind. Would you censor Fox News?
Fox News. That's going against freedom. You can't censor media like that.
But they
That's
they openly go out there and like abuse free speech to spread like hate speech and like non-factual information.
So like you believe in fact checking?
Yeah, like people shouldn't be spreading
But again, that
information
goes
like
against
it's
free
true.
speech, though.
Yeah, but
I'm a libertarian socialist, and I believe that you should give people their individual rights. You can't take them
we
away.
just talked about how education is so important. You're going against that exact axiomatic belief of how we should educate people between
Yes, we should
right
educate
and bad
them,
news.
but like you can't take away their rights, dude. The same argument you're using, ban all drugs because they're bad, and then legal problem is you have to allow drugs and focus on education and rehabilitation. Satwik, you said that, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
but
that's
we're saying like basically people go on Fox News and have like, or how about not? Let's not even talk about. How about like
Daily Wire.
yeah, like Turning Point, yeah, the Daily Wire, or like Turning Point USA. Would you go after these places or Breitbart? Like,
I would obviously go after them, but
I'd go after Breitbart because they've actually like, if somebody actually puts out like stuff that isn't correct, or like I feel like I would be kind of on the side of I'm sorry, Skanda.
yeah.
Sorry, yeah. I would be on your side in terms of like censoring, I guess, just because I wouldn't, as the government, it's gonna look bad.
Yeah.
Optics wise, if I'm gonna censor right wing media, it's just gonna give them more reactionary, like, oh, he's trying to stifle. What's he gonna do next? He's gonna go to
the authoritarian left. The back at it.
Protesters.
and that's the thing that like
you take
Americans
away,
like think about the left. They think it's authoritarian. So if if you as a left wing president start to do that, you're gonna lose support very, very quickly.
Yeah.
You know what I think is a middle ground we could do? Because I understand the sentiment that, you want to get rid of Fox News. I think there's genuine reason you could. I just think it has too much of a media manipulative force that by banning it, you would do more harm, like Dylan said, optics-wise, and that would be terrible for us because it would just confirm their misconception that we're authoritarian. I think a middle ground could be, let's say, I would be completely fine with, for example, you guys know Steven Crowder, right? Or Ben Shapiro? I mean, yeah, exactly. So you know how they have millions of followers on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
One of the things which would have no problem with is deplatforming them, because platforms like Twitter when people like many right wingers construe and talk about, oh, it's free speech. It isn't. It's a private platform that Twitter allows you to use. So if we could pressure Twitter to get rid of Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro and these other ones. That would be a good move. I don't think that would be.
But again, you're giving
that'd be
more
terrible for
position to the
Roberts.
right if you do that.
But they do the same thing. They
Wait.
do the same thing to
Okay,
us, though.
that's fine. That's
the
fine.
problem.
That's all fine
You're
with
just gonna
private
make the right-wing coalition stronger if you remove them from the media.
Okay,
They're
that's
gonna
fine
come up
with
and say,
all.
"Oi, why did you remove Ben Shapiro? Oi, why did you remove Ben Shapiro?" They're all gonna come unite and they're gonna come and do like a right-wing protest.
But I would argue
Unite
they're
the
already
right
united.
too.
I would argue they're already to the point where they're already united in their cause. Like, have you guys ever seen? This is just like an anecdote, but have you guys ever seen that clip where it's Dave Rubin, who's a gay guy, with Ben Shapiro, and he's like, "Would you come to my wedding?" And Ben's like, I don't know. I don't think I would." Like, open homophobia, but it doesn't matter because they're already so united with their cause that they both agree with one another on so many other things.
Yeah, I agree with censoring hate speech. Like, we should obviously, if there's like transphobia or any of those hate speech, of course we have to censor hate speech.
But wouldn't you argue, though, that Steven Crowder and other ones like Ben Shapiro actively promote transphobia? Like, I remember once Vosh talked
and we
about
take
how
down those videos that if
Yeah.
they
But it's every single
But
video.
it's almost every like I literally remember Vosh talking about Steven
not
Crowder,
video.
and he's like, Vosh talks about how Steven Crowder also said he's empathetic of trans people because he thinks they're mentally ill. He's like, oh yeah, I'm empathetic of them because they're mentally ill. I want to help them. Like, I swear to God, like this is.
Okay, I want to talk more about like that's all fine and good on private platforms. What about like publications that have their own platforms, like Breitbart or the Daily Wire or Fox?
Well,
Like,
if
if you
violate the basic rules, we can take them down.
you can't, or you can. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
If they violate certain rules, then we should be able to take them down. If they promote like hate towards one another, then you can take them down for hate speech.
But isn't that what they do already?
Yeah, they already do that.
But no, because but if they did that, then all of those things would have been taken down already.
Why would they be
What?
taken down? Why would they be taken down though?
What? You can't use that. That's not a logical
Didn't we agree that the state isn't a neutral arbiter? The state is like one way or another. Like, why would Trump like say, yeah, let's take him down? Like, no.
They wouldn't though. That's the problem. That's whatever though.
I don't think that I would personally like take down the news networks.
Oh yeah, that goes against
because like they also control a bit of capital, and like you don't want them to like. I don't know.
Okay, so
if you
child pornography controls capital, would you take down the child pornography site?
Okay. I mean that's different.
But that's actually
I would.
Rules.
I guess that violates like. I don't know.
No, if they violate the rules, we take them down.
You know what I think is
obviously
really
they're
easy
not
way.
Violating the rules.
You know what I think is a really easy way of doing this? I think we could all basically agree with this. I don't think this is really that much controversial. Remember how remember how in the past 2-3 years, when looking back at many terrorist attacks, a large majority of them have been white nationalist ones. And I think even prominently when they've looked on, let's say, their computers and analyzed, the FBI, I mean, but when the government analyzed what these people were watching, and what they would find is, for example, there was this one guy who they searched his computer and they found they recorded the number of times he would go on a website, and the number one website he would go on is Ben Shapiro's YouTube channel.
Was this a Christchurch guy?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think it was that one. And it would be the number one was Ben Shapiro. Number 4 was Richard Spencer. All the top ones, like let's say Breitbart, The Daily Storm. I think then that could be a legal precedent to say, listen, how many terrorist attacks have happened from people like watching these news outlets, and they look into it and they could obviously find. I think it would be very easy then, like optics wise, to then say this is hate speech. You know, terrorists are looking at these and they're becoming radicalized. I think it would be then pretty legally normal to say let's take them down. What do you guys think?
I feel like you could probably take down Breitbart. You can probably take down the smaller ones. The ones that have like legal backing, you need to like adjust your optics. I agree that you need to adjust your optics so that you can frame it like these organizations are propping up terrorists, like domestic terrorists in this country. I just feel like that might go the other way, and the rightists will play on the centrists, like, oh, they're both like, oh, both
Taking out free speech.
centrism horseshoe. Yeah,
They're gonna say
they were like, oh,
but-
Antifa is terrible. Really dumb.
well, technically, we can publicize these. No, like, what do you think about private platforms like being publicized? Like, everyone can a public platform. Like, let's turn Twitter into a public platform. What do you think of that?
Like controlled by the government?
Platform.
Like,
Controlled by the
Controlled by, like,
government?
the people.
so if it turns into a public platform, it's like all the rules of the amendments apply, or all the rules of the government apply. Like, that's what we mean by having a public what was it, institution or whatever, that where we can post our publications or whatever.
So you do mean like setting up a website that would be public platform online, like let's say not like Twitter but public?
Yeah.
Uh,
What do you guys think? I'm not sure.
I mean, it's like an idea that come up that that private. It's like, or you could do it like in a sort of way, like with power plants, or like it's some sort of like government subsidized thing. But
if we have a here's what I think. If we have a public platform where we can post public social media, it would be all under rules. Like, corporations can have their biases and ban certain things.
Oh yeah, to enforce the law,
Yeah.
but then you would be required to not be anonymous.
What do you mean?
Like,
well, technically you're still anonymous, but the government can take down things that don't follow rules. You'll still be anonymous though.
Isn't that what's already happening though? Like, Twitter has their own terms of services.
What do you mean?
Like, do you not think Twitter's terms of services line up with like good values in the Bill of Rights?
Some of them they can take down like things with no consent.
Okay, but then like, are you talking about like copyright law on YouTube? Because
yeah, like the
but that's already under government rules.
What?
Like, it's not YouTube's copyright law, it's like the government's copyright law.
But if we make here, the left-wing position argues that we should publicize all forms, like, so all, like, have a public publication online. And currently online is controlled by private institutions.
So you mean like making the internet a public access? Like, everyone has access to the internet?
Yeah.
Isn't that virtually like what we have though?
Well,
no, because we're paying for internet right now.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, as a free commodity.
Get permission.
Yeah, then I agree.
Yeah.
Because it's so. Yeah.
Even Secular Talk says that we should publicize like social media forms and all of that. You guys watch Secular Talk or what?
Oh, Kyle.
Yeah.
Kalkowski.
Kyle Klinsky.
I watched him like a little bit, and then I like didn't. I liked like 5 of his videos, and then kind of left.
You guys want to wrap up?
That was me too.
Wait, so if you publicized social media, like, that would make it easier or harder for you to ban hate speech?
It would make it like more free for everyone instead of being like controlled by like private institutions. Right? First of all, we have oppression by corporations. That's another problem we're seeing with social media. And if it would be public, everyone would have access to it. Right? It would be free.
Right, but can't the government already order like the FBI could close down like a child pornography account or something on
Obviously, if it
Twitter.
violates the rules, they can do that. But if it doesn't, then everyone's feel free to, have access to the public institution.
Right. So what I understand what you're saying with making it public. I just don't see what it has to do with the argument
With what?
about like censoring hate speech.
Well, I obviously changed the topic, but if we make it more public, then we would be more free, though, right? Technically, and hate speech under the law should be banned, of course, because that's not free speech.
Wait, but you're insinuating that we're in like some weird situation where like corporations are censoring us too much, but I don't think that's the case at all.
I mean, they could be like in an indirect way, they are kind of censoring us because all of the news networks work within a capitalist system in which you can hire and fire whoever you want, who will, as long as you just advance your material gain. So I guess it is, they're controlling it. If he decides to more nationalize news, it might be a little weird because people who like nationalize news really haven't gotten the best.
So you want like something like NPR? Well, okay. Well, then it becomes like really confusing. Like, you want to have like state news, or do you want something like NPR? Or
yeah, I'm really confused about that. Like, what's the role of the That's the one thing I'm really concerned about is what would be the role of the state in regards to if we nationalized some kind of a platform. Like, the specific rules would apply, but could you elaborate? Like, what would you want?
I already told you, like having a public forum where everyone can post, and the only thing the state does is like should do or is just enforce laws, and if there's any hate speech or whatever, take it down.
Right. Aren't there already some platforms that already do that at a lesser? Isn't that already still
like all the institutions are private right now?
Yeah, I know.
Online are private.
Yeah. So besides restricting access to the internet, what is the problem with that?
What do you mean,
like in terms of censoring hate speech, what is the problem with all the institutions being private?
Because it's still, I already told you, they're still indirectly censoring you.
But who are they censoring? Like, this is not reality. Yeah. We're not in some reality where they're censoring too much. They're censoring too little.
But like, if we publicize it, then we have more it would be more open. Listen, do you guys understand? Like, publicizing it makes it more open. You guys want that, right? You guys want.
I understand. The one thing that I'm not sure of is that I think I kind of agree with Ashwin is that I think this is so. I know that there are a lot of people who have this, and I think they have fair criticisms of. I think Dylan even mentioned how corporations self-censor themselves, or they promote people who promote the corporate interest because that's the views that make them money, and that's what keeps them going. I understand that. At the same time, I think that there are already decent enough platforms online that already decently protect free speech, and it isn't necessary to have like a specific governmental sponsored program, because that in and of itself would have a lot of worries. What would the government censor? Would it censor anything at all? Would it be completely free? Like, free to what? Free to who? Who could use it? There would be a lot of questions that we would have to answer that I think to at least now, I think, like, let's say, for example, Twitter. I know that Twitter, I think, has been taking active steps to censor, right-wingers more so, I think, or like Nazis specifically. But I don't see that as like a loss for, you know what I mean? Like, correct me if I'm wrong. I just don't see. I think it would just make more problems than it would.
Yeah, I feel like we're trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist necessarily. Also, my concern because these are like private platforms, like there is competition, right? So users can say, I don't want to use this platform anymore if it's promoting hate speech. You can boycott a platform. And I feel that since it's a private platform, they're kind of like enslaved to what their users want, you know, like they have to cater to their users to some way. Well, as if it's like a government subsidized program, the profits of the program don't matter so much on like how happy the users are with their experience, because well, you're subsidizing it, so it's like immune to what the people actually think about the program, you know.
But like competition would like if it's for profit, they again another thing with profit institutions. If it's for profit, they don't really care about their people.
Yeah,
Nice, right?
I agree with that. Like, yeah, for profit, they might like, for example, like get rid of anti-Trump posts or something like that, or like to just for like if they're getting bribed or if they're getting money for it. But like, I think, like Alan said, like we already have some platforms that are trying their best to not become like completely corrupt. Like, I think what you're getting at is like you're getting to the point where like you're saying that the like everything, all platforms in the current society are like corrupt. But like I think there's still a lot of improvement, and I think we can still get to the right and the information that is correct without having a government centralized, or rather a federalized media platform.
And I know we've been connecting like for-profit corporations with exploitation, but who's being exploited?
The people are being exploited. Duh. That's what happens if you
How?
Because like
the news, I guess.
Wait, what corporations like CNN or Fox News talking about those?
No, like Twitter. How is Twitter
Yeah.
exploiting people?
No, like naturally they'll eventually come to an exploitative stage because that's what for-profit models are.
But that's not matching up with reality.
What do you mean that's not matching up with reality?
Who's being exploited right now on Twitter? If anything, I would say the programmers that work for Twitter are being exploited, but it's not the users.
I think the main distinction you have to make, I think what he's saying is generally true. So for-profit corporations like CNN or MSNBC, like if you look at, let's say, I think he's right. So for example, let's say the reporters who are on CNN, they make $8 million, $9 million, $3 million a year. Thus, it's not like it's like the same thing where people talk about like, oh, it's not like a secret cabal of capitalists deciding the agenda every Tuesday night. That's not how it works. It's a very rational class interest. So for these people that, let's say, are in the reporters in CNN or bosses, it's not that they necessarily have mischievous motives. It's just that they live in a system and they've been promoted by people who believe that their place there is to make as much profit as possible. And they're just unknowingly there in a position promoting beliefs which promote the beliefs of the corporation. I get that. That makes sense. I would very much critique CNN or any other liberal to conservative type corporate news outlet for the exact same things, promoting centristy capitalist perspectives. But I think Ashton has a point when he talks about Twitter, because Twitter isn't CNN in the sense that Twitter doesn't like promote its own news. It's like, for the most part, you go on Twitter to read the texts and tweets of other people. So it's not like Twitter isn't. I think there is like a motive that maybe in the future, because Twitter's for profit, it'll do things that make it more money. So that's a downside. But I think Ashwin is right that in most cases, because people go to Twitter to just view other people's tweets, that generally it's not that bad.
Yeah,
But
I think this is a good. I just want to wrap it up now. Is that okay, Skanda?
Well, what do you mean? Wrap
Well,
it up.
let's
Because they have to go now.
first.
Yeah, Skanda,
so
we already it's past our
Like,
time.
just give
We
our
usually do like an
final
hour.
thoughts. Is that okay
Yeah.
with you? I'm sorry, I know we've been cutting you off a lot.
I love to do long rants.
Yeah. Oh, you can come on another episode if you want.
Oh yeah.
We're happy to have you.
What's this episode gonna be about? We talked about
I
socialism,
have no idea.
capitalism at the beginning. Then we talked about lesser of two evils. Then we
I'll have
talked
to
about
put a title on it after I re-listen to it. But
Dude,
I just want
to have
to
a whole playlist on a political.
Just put everything. That's the title.
Yeah. No, just put talking about lesser of two evils, about the current flaws of our system, and then say news media and I don't know social media outlets.
No, wait,
Something
no,
like
no,
that.
we can't. Wait, that's a little bit too long. You know, we have to put Skanda destroys the left wingers at their own game. Hashtag left cops.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I
so
sound
just
like
I
a
guess we can do our
conservative.
final thoughts about
Yeah,
it.
final thoughts.
I guess I don't know. Well, a big theme I see with like leftist thought really is, first of all, we seem to think that capitalism is all bad. Now, I don't want you guys to jump on me here, but
Uh-oh.
we understand. We need to come with the understanding that it has. Dude, I'm about to get fucking roasted, aren't I? Not?
Just, you know,
No, you're actually fine. I agree with you, Ashwin.
There are ideals in capitalism that are ethical, and we have to remember capitalism was started for egalitarian reasons. Now, the end result. Well, it was. It's an enlightenment.
Capitalism started with free markets and saying we're not like feudalism. So like it started with the free market idea, me asking for freedom and equality, but that wasn't the case because I told you free markets lead to monopolies and exploitation of workers to that stage. Okay,
Yeah.
Hey, that's big.
so
That's
the
true.
what
That's
love.
true.
Let him finish. Let him finish, Skanda.
But I think we come to these situations with like Twitter and social media, and I think we're really quick to start jumping on the exploitative, and then like throwing words around like they're exploiting us, they're for profit, this and that. Well, these platforms kind of like, I feel like they almost kind of embody what capitalism wanted, which is like self-determinism and the ability to determine your own what value. But but I understand we also have to see like the problems and how the outcome was not what the original thinkers of capitalism wanted. But we can't just dismiss everything completely.
I agree with that. Yeah, we just can't be dogmatic. There's no room here for dogmatism.
So that's kind of where my final thoughts are.
You guys sound like centrists.
We're enlightened. We look at both sides equally.
I'm
what are
an
we still on?
anarcho-Nazi feminist. I'm a centrist.
What are we talking about? I'm an authoritarian, Posadist monarchist. All right? Work with me here.
All right. So like, what's their final thoughts now?
Wait, is it like final thoughts on the news thing or final thoughts in general?
What do you think about the current situation? Or we talked about flaws of capitalism first, then we talked about lesser of two evils, and then we talked about news media and social media. So like overall synopsis on what you guys think of it.
Well, here's what I get at is that going back to the whole argument, like we started in the beginning, like revolution and reform, right? That's where we started, and we got into like the media and all that. I think it's important to understand that radicalism is great, and like revolutions and like the socialist philosophy is great, but you kind of have to start with small steps. And it's all great to talk about in theory right now, and talk about how the workers rule and decentralizing the capitalism and making sure that the government is working for the people, not for the capitalists. It's great to talk about in theory, but to get to that, like that's where Marx like couldn't finish his papers, right? Like he couldn't really explain how to get there. So that's what we are to kind of getting at, is that yes, we're getting at this theoretical, this dogmatic approach of getting to socialism, but we really don't have the small steps to get there. So again, going back to the concept of what Alan said, like we kind of have to get the material conditions, and from there on, we can start to talk about it.
All right. So definitely, yes, Satwik. Like, what do you think about current conditions?
Okay, Skanda, we concluded we're not adding more topics now. Just finish off with the conclusive. We can have another discussion later.
All right, got you. till in the next podcast.
All right, see you guys.
Wait, where did I close?
Oh no, go ahead. Yeah, Dylan, my bad.
Oh shit. Shoot. I should probably make this quick then. I guess something that just went through my head most of the time was more pragmatism. It's something that a lot of, I feel like, leftists, they get like shit on for the most. Sorry, in YouTube, but yeah, I feel like a lot of them get just stigmatized, I guess, for being entrenched in theory and not having any real pragmatic things to implement into the world and using very vague concepts. I feel like we kind of went through that with mostly the first two, in terms of reformism and shoot, what was the second one again?
Censorship of hate speech.
Censorship.
Yeah, censorship. We kind of went through sort of like no, lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
We went through sort of like this things of how pragmatic something would be versus how ideal something would be. I feel like in order to build like a coherent ideology, especially if it's political, it must be rooted within the human material world. It must be constructed with a general understanding of what it is, what something is right now. And I feel like aiming for like a ideal world without acknowledging where you are right now isn't healthy. And like even on a personal level, I believe like you should always do small goals to achieve your greater goals, because although it seems really far, if you keep working on it, then you will achieve it. There's more complexities to that. There's more nuances to that in the real world, where there's actually like people that control everything, and there's people that control virtually nothing. But within your circumstances, like I feel like in America, we're actually kind of lucky that we have the circumstances to sort of achieve this ideology or even think about this ideology. We're not in like North Korea or China where we really can't express that. But I feel like in order to achieve change, we must root our ideas within pragmatism and continue to work through all means, not just limit ourselves to one way of achieving something, but branch out and kind of work together, platform each other, work together to achieve socialism.
Well, another thing we can see is how everything's just de-escalating. The economy is like doing poorly, and after seeing what's going on, this could also like wake up more people to say, oh no, the economy is not working for us, we need some sort of reform or possibly like a revolution. But that, I don't know if that's gonna happen. Probably not. At least some sort of reform to like our policies, or how we can achieve like socialist policies, like getting healthcare, all of these, at least achieving some sort of workplace democracy too. Well, that's one for our current situation, what's going on. And we're seeing with lesser of two evils, like I think Joe Biden's gonna win at this point, right? Like we're seeing how bad the current situation is. And then for censorship of the media, I don't know what's going on with, I don't really like at least publicize like news media outlets, or yeah. And I'd like to end it off with what do you guys think?
Just to end off with me, I am just going around from what we said before with reformist revolution. I'd agree with Dylan's perspective and Ashton. We've got to be pragmatic. We should use all avenues necessary to get through the change that we need. I'm also hopeful for the future in the way that Dylan put it, how you have to go for very small goals first and be pragmatic about where you're going to get to. I know I'm probably never going to live to a day where I'm going to see an anarcho-syndicalist society, or even ones where worker councils are the dominant form of government, where the the workers can truly rule themselves democratically in both politically and economically. I don't know if I'll ever see that day, but for me, it's the most important is to get people to a position where they can make the change even after I'm gone personally. That's I think that's important. But I'm still optimistic because as much as I, let's say, disagree with Lenin, there was one really motivating quote that he once said, which was that there are some decades where weeks happen, and there are some weeks where decades happen, which is a really inspiring quote. That in sometimes there are massive amounts of change, like how we've been seeing in the past month or two with George Floyd's murder, and how much public outrage it generated, which is unfathomable 2 months ago to even comprehend. So I'm optimistic for the future, cautiously, and yeah, that's my final words.